Professor Jill Rubery has worked in Manchester since 1989, and in fact was first based at the Manchester School of Management at UMIST, and since 2004 she's been here at Alliance Manchester Business School. She's currently Executive Director of the Work and Equalities Institute, with particular responsibility for the Institute's international networks. I'm sure many of you probably know Jill's research interests, but I'll repeat them anyway for purposes of this forum. Her interests really are in comparative employment systems, but with particular focus on gender. She's researched and published widely on topics such as labour market regulation policies, minimum wages, new forms of work and flexibility, women's employment and women's pay, and employers' working time policies, to name many others. Thank you. Nice to see you, Jill, today. Charles Cotton is Senior Rewards Advisor at the CIPD. Charles directs its reward research agenda and recently produced a survey on UK reward management. He's led research into areas such as how employers can help improve their employees' understanding of their personal finances, how frontline managers make and communicate reward decisions to their employees, how employers manage the risks around reward, and also how private sector employers can build the business case for workplace pensions. He's also responsible for the CIPD's public policy work in the area of reward and has given evidence to select committees on banking pay, executive remuneration, and also politicians' expenses. Our final and third and final speaker is Lynn Collins, who is Northwest Regional Secretary at the TUC. Lynn has worked for several trade unions in senior positions and served on a range of equality bodies during that period. Lynn was appointed Regional Secretary to TUC here in the Northwest in 2013 and was the first woman to hold that position. She's been politically active all her working life, both for the trade union movement and in international solidarity campaigns. Prior to her appointment at the TUC, Lynn worked for a number of trade unions in senior positions, including the University and Colleges Union, the National Union of Teachers, and also at Unison, and has served on a range of equality bodies, including the Women's National Commission, the TUC Youth Committee, and TUC's Women's Committee, and was also an equality lead for unions in the NHS. So welcome, Lynn, as well. Welcome to all three of you. Without any further ado, I'm going to now go to our first question. Each of our panelists will have just around 3 minutes to answer each question. I've been told I'm going to be very strict with time today in order to keep to half an hour. So let's go straight in and ask Jill the first question, which is, based on your work, Jill, what do you think are two of the key issues that need addressing in order to move closer to the goal of equal pay?
Thanks very much for your introduction, Jim, and a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start by suggesting the most difficult thing, but the most important thing, is to create a more equal and fairer overall labour market. One of the problems about equal pay, pursued only as an issue of gender pay equality, is that in the end it will only help those some women and not all. And that in fact, if we look across countries, there are two factors that determine the gender pay gap. The first is where women are ranked relative to men. And secondly, the penalty for being lower ranked relative to men. And if you have a more unequal pay structure, the penalty is higher. And I think, therefore, we have to look, combine our struggles for equal pay with a general struggle for wider pay equality involving men as well as women, and narrowing the differential between top earners and lower earners. The second issue is, obviously we do need to nevertheless make progress on the gender issue, but we won't make progress within organisations unless we change the way in which organisations think about pay. With the collapse of collective bargaining in many areas, there's been a move towards thinking that pay should be determined by the external market and not by the jobs that people do and the value of those jobs. And that's a major problem. Now, Iceland started a process of requiring employers to be certified as equal pay employers, and they had to prove that their pay structure met the equal pay laws. And this meant they had to think about their grading structures. which they didn't necessarily have fully before. And this is an important process. And this may happen across Europe if the current proposal for an EU pay transparency directive is approved. It's a pity, actually. I was expecting to see more focus on that in the toolkit. And I suppose there's an indication of how far Brexit has further removed us from the EU, but it's important for people to know there is a pay transparency directive going through European processes at the moment and would require employers to explain and justify their pay setting processes. And that those two general points, I know they're very general, are absolutely fundamental for us to really make meaningful progress on equal pay.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you. Dead on time as well. Perfect timing there. Over now to Charles. Same question to you. So based on your work, what do you think are the two of the key issues need addressing in order to move closer to the goal of equal pay?
Hi, so hopefully everybody can hear me. For me, one issue to be overcome is the taboo that exists around talking about money. For a variety of reasons, chatting about money isn't usually seen as something that's socially acceptable. However, not does this attitude have implications for pay fairness, because how can you work out if you're being paid fairly if people aren't prepared to be open with you, either your colleagues or the HR department? But it can also have impacts on mental health. And currently it's Talk Money Week, where the Money and Pension Service is encouraging people to talk about their money concerns. And the idea is that if we can normalise conversations about money, we'll be better able to tackle financial distress. Now, hopefully, this campaign will encourage people to be more open with their work colleagues, not only about pay, but also benefit issues as well, because as the toolkit highlights, there's not just various wage gaps, but pension gaps as well. Now, another issue, I think, is around employee data. Often, unfortunately, it's not just a case of pressing a button on a HR database and the relevant figure appearing. We need employers to invest in the technology that captures, analyzes and reports the right information in the right way and at the right time. Otherwise, getting the data for equal pay analysis is going to be a laborious and time-consuming exercise. And I think in addition, for some reviews, the information is only going to be as good as what employees disclose. For example, it will be difficult to carry out a pay review by ethnicity if people don't disclose that information. So employers and unions need to kind of come together to explain why getting this information is going to be vital. Hopefully I've managed to do that within my allotted time.
You're well within, Charles. Very good.
Perhaps I spoke too quickly. So.
No, don't apologise. Thanks, Charles. Was there anything else you wanted to add? You've got to that question. Oh, I think we muted you. Muted again.
And was about legal restrictions?
Sorry, Charles, you just missed a slightly there because you muted. Just repeat what you just said, please.
I suppose the only other thing I was going to add was about the confusion possibly sometimes around legal restrictions around talking about pay in the workplace. I mean, these gagging clauses are no longer enforceable. However, I think personally, I'd like to see the law to be clarified to say that rather than gagging clauses just being unenforceable, I think they should just be illegal.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Let's now turn to Lynn with that same question. Lynn, just to remind the audience, again, the question was, based on your work, what do you think are two of the key issues need addressing in order to move closer to the goal of equal pay?
Okay, thanks, Jim. And it won't probably surprise you at all that the first thing I think needs addressing is the proper trade union rights and the expansion of collective bargaining. Equal pay has always been a trade union thing, and actually it's a very Northwest trade union thing as well. In the last 50 years, it's been trade unions who've helped change both the law on equal pay and the workplace landscape on equal pay. We've won equal pay through negotiation, through industrial action, and through those changes to the law. And we've pushed employers to have fair and transparent pay systems right back from the Dagenham and Halewood women, but through as well to Julie Haywood, the landmark case on equal pay for work of equal value. So I think a renewed approach and a renewed spread of collective bargaining, it will actually underpin much fairer, clearer, transparent pay systems. And with the sectoral approach to collective bargaining, you can actually set standards in a sector so that you can raise pay across a sector and make sure that it's regulated, and those kind of transparencies are built into the system. So much more collective bargaining would be my number one thing. The second is, I suppose, a societal thing, and that's greater work to eradicate gendered job segregation. I started my working life in 1986 as a computer scientist with Plessy Telecoms, and at the time there weren't many women in that. Sadly, there's even less women working in computer science and tech now than there was then, and we've made no real progress to tackle gender segregation in a whole host of sectors. If you take particularly things like social care, childcare and retail, gender segregation has created low pay ghettos, and that's where pay gaps have opened up. So that needs tackling, and I'm pleased to say people like the Greater Manchester Women and Girls panel are starting to look at that. But there's got to be a real cradle to workplace approach to it, so it starts, right at a very early age. And it is a trade union issue. I think trade unions have got a real role to play there, encouraging women in atypical professions to be role models, to work with schools, to talk about their roles, working with employers to diversify apprenticeship schemes. So one workplace issue, one societal issue from me. Hopefully that's 3 minutes.
Spot on, Lynn. Thank you. Okay, let's take another question now, which is, I think, a very good one, actually. Discussions about equal pay, involve different stakeholders, of course. Employers, unions, employees. So I'm going to take, first of all, again, go back to Jill with this question, which is, Jill, in your view, what actions do you think could be taken for them to work together more effectively in order to tackle pay inequalities?
Okay, well, I'm going to take the argument that Lynn put forward as given, that actually more trade union rights and collective bargaining would help matters, and that's very much in line with what I was saying about our fairer, more equal pay structure. But what I'm going to say now is taking the status quo, if you like, recognizing that at the moment there isn't that much collective bargaining, and how can we get these stakeholders to work together on the equal pay issue? Well, the first point I want to make is missing from those stakeholders is the government. And in areas such as social care, it's really important that the funders of social care are also at the table, not just the employers. And that's been happening in Scotland, where they are trying to develop sectoral level collective bargaining for social care. And it also happened in a landmark pay equity agreement in New Zealand, where it was the state that took responsibility for bringing about a collective agreement, raising pay by up to 50% for social care workers. So that's really important. I think in terms of employers are often motivated by issues of reputation, and the gender pay gap reporting, Black Lives Matter movements, etc., are really important in raising awareness and employers recognizing they need to do something. But that can be quite superficial. They're also motivated by issues of labour shortage, but I think that has a bit of a poison chalice, that, because I think it might reinforce their view that women aren't reliable or something, that that they won't necessarily think of women as solving the labour shortages. I've been making that argument in Europe for many years, that when they talk about skill shortages, they ignore the fact that many people are underutilised in their skills, etc. But nevertheless, labour shortages might bring them to the table, if you like. And the final thing, in my own experience, is that they often come to the table when they've actually had some personal experience in their own lives. They've suddenly found that their daughter they've expensively educated managers can't get a job or isn't paid fairly, and that suddenly the lights go on and they realise that this is something that they need to do something about. But that's hard to actually generalise about. So bringing employers to the table is problematic in the lack of collective bargaining. I think for trade unions, there needs to be more recognition that the responsibility for funding equal pay should not lie with the male workers in the same bargaining unit as the women who are being underpaid, because they're often relatively underpaid too. We have to find mechanisms for paying for equal pay by distributing that cost across the whole of the organisation, the top management, rather than the workers immediately alongside. Not just top management, throughout the pay grades. It shouldn't just be a redistribution amongst men and women at the bottom of the labour market. And I think that would help with some of the trade union concerns they've had in the past about equal pay issues. That the problem, how do you pay for equal pay in the public sector, for example, when they're being strapped for cash for everybody? We need an equal pay settlement by the government to enable that to happen. And employees, we need to raise awareness of how pay should or ought to be set. People don't seem to have much understanding of the equal pay, that it is about the job and not about people's market value. We need to get people to recognize that starting salaries in companies is one of the main causes of the gender pay gap. And unless women are aware of this and willing to bargain over their starting salaries, they're almost destined forevermore to be paid less than the men who are employed alongside them, because whatever they get in terms of pay increases, they'll still be chasing a higher salary paid by their male colleagues. So a range of things, but I would go with Lynn's argument in the first place.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I'm going to bring Lynn back in actually, because on those various points that Jill mentioned around unions, and then I'll come to Charles after, if that's okay. So Lynn, do you want to come back on that? And again, just the question was, in your view, what actions do you think could be taken for the various stakeholders, to work together more effectively to tackle pay inequalities?
Well, if we do get to a position where we've got sectoral bargaining bodies, we'll have government employers and trade unions together there. But in the absence of those, we do have Labour metro mayors in our area, and both in Liverpool City region and in Greater Manchester, the introduction of local employment charters has presented an opportunity for partners to sit together and co-design accreditation systems that do address these issues. So in the charters here in the Northwest, we've made sure that pay audits feature and are mentioned as good practice for employers, and pay gap reporting, both on gender but also on ethnicity, are going to feature in those charters as well. Now, there's been a spirit of collaboration in the development of those charters. We've worked with partners like CIPD, ACAS, employers' organisations, and they've been well received by employers who want to prove that they're doing the right thing. And I think it picks up the issue that I think Jill touched on about the reputational standing of employers to be seen to be doing the right thing. So I think we need to use them much more effectively, and trade unions themselves need to make sure that equal pay is on the bargaining agenda. We've had a lot that we've faced in the pandemic that's removed an awful lot from the bargaining agenda, but we want to see equal pay back on the bargaining agenda, both in national negotiations, but also at a very local level, because in a lot of private sector organisations, there's no national bargaining structures, and it's down to our local reps. And that's where training for our local union representatives is really, really important as well, and making sure that they're equipped to understand what equal pay is about, how unequal pay can develop in the workplaces, and how they as union reps can work with their collective membership to challenge this at a very, very local level.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks. Charles, same question to you again, just to remind everybody, what actions do you think could be taken for various stakeholders to work together more effectively to tackle pay inequalities?
I think, well, a lot of money is spent by employers on pay and benefits. So management and investors will want to know if the money is being well spent. Now, if decisions about how jobs are valued or pay structures are created or how people progress through these pay structures are all biased by prejudice, then employers are going to be at a competitive advantage, competitive disadvantage compared to those other employers, because people won't want to join a firm or might not feel motivated to perform, or might look to leave because they feel their contributions aren't being recognised. And in addition, employers could be open to legal challenge. So by regularly checking pay outcomes, such as through audits or surveying employees, as an employer, you're going to be able to work out whether the pay budget is delivering the results that it's supposed to. And of course, investors are also becoming more aware of ESG issues. Now, while the E is grabbing the attention now up in Scotland, fund managers are also wanting to know more about the S. the social side, the social area. So how staff are managed, developed and rewarded. Having these data should help firms when they're having these conversations with their investors. And I mentioned earlier about the importance of pay openness. So it makes sense for employers to be clear and transparent about how pay is managed and how benefits are managed, so employees know what they can expect from their employers and how and why those decisions are being arrived at.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Thanks. Okay, so let's now go to our third and final question for this session, this half-an-hour Q&A session, if you like, is after this session, of course, we can move into breakout rooms to discuss the toolkit which Jenny and Sophie mentioned at the beginning of the event. Jill, back to you. Having seen the work undertaken so far with the toolkit, what would you see as the sort of points and areas of consideration and reflection that you think need special attention? And you already touched on before, I think, your own views on the toolkit. Perhaps expand further on what you said earlier.
Well, the first point I wanted to make is to make a link between what I said about fair pay systems and equal pay. Something people aren't necessarily fully aware of is that there isn't a requirement under equal pay law that pay should be proportional to the value of the job for the firm. So if you compare yourself as a woman to another man doing what appears to be a fairly similar job, and it's found that they're slightly more valuable, there's nothing to say whether or not that person should get 10% more or 100% more than you do. There's no requirement that the amount that somebody who's doing a more valuable job should be paid relative to the person doing a less valuable, but it should be proportional to the difference in value. And I think if you had a more system of thinking about trying to develop a pay structure that was proportional to the value of everybody's job in the company, you would also bring on board some of the men who are underpaid, which I think is always a good idea. I think there should be solidarity here. It's not only women who are underpaid, there are quite a lot of men who are underpaid. And it also means that you would move towards a fairer system within the organization itself, and not only about gender pay equality. And those gender pay equality things are difficult to prove, because saying something is exactly the same value as another job is more difficult than saying, well, it's quite close to it, 10% more or 10% less than another job. And so I think that the equal pay laws need to be sort of taken, the spirit of them need to be taken and not the detail, and actually say what equal pay for work of equal value means is that people should be paid proportionally to the value to the company. And that provides a basis or a starting point for having a fair pay structure. The other thing I was going to say about transparency, but Charles has already touched on that. So I'll just move to my final point, and that is, I suppose, not fetishizing about the actual gender pay gap within organizations. There is a major problem of small numbers at times, that things can move around very fast because, a senior manager who's either white or not white or female leaves, and the whole system appears to have deteriorated dramatically, but it's actually a function of small numbers. And I think if we got to make progress on intersectionality, instead of focusing only or mainly on pay gaps, I think we should be focusing on more directly measurable factors that have some sort of substance, which is the starting salaries in similar jobs, the time taken to promotion, the pay rise given at promotion. These kind of more qualitative things really get to the heart of where the inequalities arise from. Because also with racial and ethnic minorities, but particularly with people like disabilities, the small numbers means that these pay gaps can be very difficult to interpret and may lead to companies trumpeting their success, and then the next year having to sort of eat humble pie, but in fact it's just one person or two people left, and it's not really a change in policy or a change in practice. So let's focus on the practices that underpin these things and get at the more detail.
Thanks, Jill. I'm going to go back to Lynn with that question. So Lynn, again, just to recap, having seen the work undertaken so far with the toolkit, what do you see as the areas for consideration and reflection that you think need attention?
Yeah, I suppose just one observation from me really, and that is when working to finalise the toolkit, try to view it through as many different lenses as possible. So let's view it through the lens of a national negotiator in a trade union who wants this issue dealt with in national pay structures, but also look at it through the lens of that local union rep who's trying to tackle this issue at work. Jill mentioned the word solidarity, and I watched an oral history video this morning of Julie Haywood, and she talked about how it was a union rep and the solidarity that really spurred her on to take that case through all those years of legal challenges, and it was that kind of spirit of solidarity. But also I think, and again I think Jill touched on this, view it through the lens of a 23-year-old woman who's applied for a job that's been advertised with competitive salary. She has no idea what anyone else is paid. She works in a small male-dominated firm. And she suddenly realised 2 years in that there are massive pay disparities because somebody said something over a drink in the pub. So view it through her lens and see what we can do to help her, as well as helping those people who are in our unionised workplaces and our larger employers with transparency in their pay structures. So try and look at the toolkit through those different lenses and make sure it helps all those people.
Thanks, Lynn. Charles, you're over to you. Same question again. Just what would you see as the key areas of consideration in terms of the toolkit, and what needs maybe special attention?
Well, I echo what Lynn has said. I mean, at the moment, it's very comprehensive, the toolkit, and I think you almost want a kind of a decision tree to say, well, if you're in these situations and these are scenarios, but this is where you should kind of go next. Because at the moment, you probably have to kind of wade through quite a lot of documentation until you actually get to the point that actually is relevant to you. So that's what I'd suggest. I mean, admittedly, it's easy to say these things than do, but I mean, if you're able to make it interactive, and you say, well, you answer some of the questions, and that then kind of leads you through to the action that you should be taking.
Okay. Jill, do you want to come back at all on anything there? Ooh. Sorry, you just muted, Jill. 1 second.
I think there is a problem that at the moment it's a bit large to digest. I think I would, in terms of that sort of decision tree, just actually to make it slightly simpler. But I think it also needs something about what the overall aims might be. To make it clear, to give people more of a steer of what they're trying to achieve in terms of the way in which employers think about pay setting. And I think particularly more about this market versus the job is a major factor that people don't understand. And I think it needs a bit more. I think that's something that needs to be at the front of the whole thing. I should say just that I don't know if it will get through EU law, but they're actually proposing that employers will not be allowed to ask about the salary of people earn when they apply for a job. So they're not supposed to pay attention to prior salaries in setting starting salaries. And they're also supposed to give evidence, tell people what the range of salary is and give information on the range of pay within similar jobs to people, so overcome some of those the 23-year-old not knowing. I'm a bit doubtful that they will pass the legislation to say you can't ask about prior salaries, but it's interesting that that's being proposed at the EU level after a lot of thought, and we're not talking about that at all in the UK.
Interesting. Thanks, Joe. And just finally, Lynn, do you want to come back at all? We've got time if you want to come back. Anything there, Lynn?
No, I mean, I think overall the toolkit's a brilliant resource, and it's thinking about how we can use that. And it may be that there's some short, snappy bits that can be pulled out as modules, or we can look at delivering training. The idea of having materials for schools, I think, is a brilliant idea as well, because it starts to then open up those discussions about gender job segregation and tackling those in an early day. So it will be great to see the final version, and it will be brilliant to be able to use it in the trade union movement.
Okay, well, that's a very fitting note. That brings to the end this first part of the session. Thanks My personal thanks to Charles, Jill and Lynn for your excellent contributions there. I'm now going to hand back over to Sophie from the Equality Trust, who will introduce the next part of the event. I'll see you again, I think at 6 o'clock when everyone comes back from your various breakout rooms.